Hand of the day.
All right, guys, let's jump right into the hand of the day. I'm really excited for this episode because it's an epic hand from the legend of online poker, Isildur, who is playing heads up for a 5,300 euro buy-in in the PartyPoker Million event in Germany that just took place.
Isil with King 6. He comes in for a raise. Pavel has Queen 7 suited in the big. Can't see him going anywhere.
He raises to 35 million. Pavel calls.
We're starting with very high blinds, 7 million, 14 million, and each player has about 500 million. So we're about 35 big blinds deep. Isildur kicks off the hand on the button, and he opens to 35 million with King 6 offsuit. Pretty standard open here. You're going to want to be opening a lot of buttons, especially 35 big blinds deep. And you want to be applying pressure. You want to be raising a lot because stealing the blinds has so much value when you're relatively short. So I think with his style, you're going to expect to see him opening a lot of buttons, but in any player in general should be opening here close to 80-90% of the time. Now, we have Pavel in the big blind who has a very standard call with Queen 7 of diamonds. Some of the hands you can argue that he would want to be 3-betting here, maybe if he had a better hand for value, but 30-35 big blinds deep, you don't want to be 3-betting a hand like this because you're giving away your equity if you get shoved on and you have to fold. So you really don't want to be 3-betting a hand unless you can call a 4-bet or unless your hand is total trash, because a hand like this plays so much better as a call. You close the action, you want to realize your equity and call and see the flop so that you could play a hand post-flop that has a lot of equity that plays very, very well. Pavel calls, let's go heads up to the flop.
Nice door card, and both players have flopped a pair.
See, Isildur does the backdoor flush draw as well with his king. He keeps the aggression up as he has done every time he's flopped any hand in the heads-up play. Pavel, of course, has backdoor diamonds. So he will surely call.
Now, if he catches a diamond on the turn, he might want to play the hand far more aggressively.
The flop comes down King, Queen, 9 with 2 hearts. Pavel checks, and now it's on Isildur. So I think here you're going to see a standard c-bet from Isildur quite a lot. With someone like his playing style, I really expect him to be betting this flop almost always with this hand. It's a flop that favors the range of the button more than it does the big blind. So because his range is stronger than the big blind, you're going to see him betting here with a lot of his hands. But you could argue, some players would argue that you would want to check back here some of the time, play a little bit of pot control, and have a hand that's strong enough to call bets on the turn and river. King 6 could be a reasonable hand to do so. You have a backdoor flush draw. You're going to be able to call any turn that comes off at least once. You're also pretty much going to be able to call any river with a hand that's this strong. So you could make a case for checking back here with this hand, but I probably like to see this as a bet given that you're 35 big blinds deep. You could get multiple streets of value. If I had a little bit weaker of a hand like a queen or a 9, something like Queen 10 or 9-10, I would include that in my flop checking range. In other words, I would check the flop with those hands and look to either bet the turn if my opponent checks or call a bet on the turn. King 6 with the backdoor flush draw I think is strong enough to bet multiple streets. I'd go ahead and put this into my flop c-betting hands, and I would c-bet this one on the flop. 45 million is a little bit on the bigger side. You normally see something like a half pot bet, 30 to 35 million. But on this board texture, I'm okay with betting bigger because it's very coordinated, very draw heavy. You want to build the pot and charge for draws right away and get value from worse hands. If the flop texture was something like King 9 deuce, a little bit drier of a texture without a flush draw, I would like to see a smaller bet here from Isildur. That said, I like the 45 million, and Pavel has a very clear check call. Check raising is just out of the question. It's way too loose. Of course, you can't fold with mid pair and a backdoor flush draw when your head's up. He has a very clear check call, which is what he does, and we go to the turn.
Currently winning, and it is the ace of diamonds on the turn.
Well, I imagine Pavel will check this and Isildur checks back.
Pavel.
Unless Isil thinks he can get his opponent to call with a worse hand. He is cutting out a big bet.
This is a big pot developing here. Pavel with third pair nut flush draw. Isildur putting a sizable bet there, 105,000. currently winning with his king.
Pavel obviously will call here. Does have a pair and the backdoor nut flush draw.
It wouldn't surprise me if he raised.
Well, I think raising just makes all the bluffs fold and every better hand still calls. Oh, he doesn't. I don't think he's thinking Isildur's necessarily going to bet this big with just the king. If he knew that, he would raise, but...
The turn comes an ace of diamonds, giving Pavel a backdoor flush draw, and it's also a scare card for Isildur. It's not a great card for his hand because he no longer has top pair. It's also a lot harder for him to get value when he has... even when he has the best hand, because it's that much less likely that his opponent is going to call with a worse hand. Pavel checks, which I think is very, very standard here, and now it's on Isildur, and here I believe the standard play is to check. Most of the time here, you're going to see a check from the button, and maybe a value bet on the river, or a call from them on the river when facing a bet as a bluff catcher. But Isildur is anything but conventional, and he goes for a bet of 105 million. Now here I guess he's hoping to get called from something like a pair and a straight draw, or a pair and a backdoor flush draw, something like 9-10 of diamonds, maybe the hand that Pavel has, Queen X of diamonds, maybe a worse king, maybe he's trying to get like a king to fold, like a king that's a chop, something like King 7. He's trying to get his opponent off of a chop, even though I don't think it's going to work that often. I think his opponent's probably going to call with a king once again. So I'm not exactly sure what he's trying to accomplish here. I guess he's trying to get some thin value from a worse hand, and instead of getting that value on the river, he's trying to get that value directly on the turn. But I think here the default play is to check, and I would probably prefer to see a check back here. Again, I don't have the history of this game, so I haven't seen exactly how these two players have been going at it. Maybe Isildur has been betting way too thin on the turn in spots like these. Maybe his opponent's shown a propensity to call too often in spots like these, so maybe he knows something I don't. But I definitely think the default play here is to check. If I do bet into 160 million, I'm going to bet a little bit smaller, something like 75 million for half pot, allowing my opponent to call that much more often with something like a 9 or a queen. But anyway, Isildur is a legend. He bets 105 and gets called by Pavel again with Queen 7 of diamonds. Here I think Pavel's play is pretty standard here to just check call. You don't really want to be check raising all in on the turn. You're only going to get called by better hands. All the bluffs are going to fold. If you have the best hand, you're calling again, sort of protects your range, and it's hopefully that you're going to just get to showdown and go check on the river and win. Otherwise, you could improve to a better hand. And I think Pavel's play is pretty standard here. It's very clear that he's going to either call the river if he hits a diamond, check call the river if he hits a diamond, or a 7 or a queen. Otherwise, he's probably going to check fold. I think that's the very standard line from Pavel, and I like that line from him as well. He decides to call. We go heads up to the river, where things get interesting.
Well, he's got a pair. If he had no pair, then I think he might try and bluff, but Pavel does have a losing hand. I suspect this will go check. Pavel trying to work out how he missed that one. So he could rep hearts here. He does rep hearts.
Wow!
He moves all in. What a play! What a play! He moves all in. How can
Surely
Isildur call?
Isildur can't call here. He's thinking it through in his head. He's thinking he called me on the flop. If he caught the ace on the turn, surely he would have bet.
Well, it's hearts or nothing.
Raised. Yes, he's checking the chip count. This would be an astonishing call if he makes it.
Surely he can't call this. There's no way Pavel calls 100 million with a flush draw.
In actual fact, he did. He had the nut flush draw in diamonds and a pair.
Well, the problem is the flush draw that he's most likely to check call with would be the king high flush draw with a pair of kings. And Isildur has that blocked. That is what is playing into Isildur's mind here. If he had the king of spades, he would just have to fold this. He does have pretty much the only flush draw.
He is seriously considering calling here, James.
I can see why. I can see his reasoning, and he's right. What hand does he call with a flush draw? Could, of course, be the nut flush draw. The only way he can be beat here is if Pavel has the nut flush. That's what he's thinking.
Oh.
Has this guy got exactly the kind of hand he has? Worst pair that is now trying to rep the flush. At first I thought there's no way I can call. Thinking through it the way he is, we can definitely find a call here.
His gut feeling is telling him to call. We've all been in this spot. Our gut says call. Our head says you can't call. You can't possibly be winning here for him to make that play. But his gut is saying call.
The king of hearts, such a crucial card here.
The river comes to 5 of hearts, and now instead of Pavel checking, which I think is the default play here, he decides to turn his hand into a bluff and bomb it all in. Nearly a pot-sized bet here. And what do we have to first think about? What is Pavel representing? Well, he's basically representing a flush in this spot. He can't really have a straight. He probably would have check-raised that all in on the turn. If he did have a straight, he would probably include that in his checking range on the river. So he's not going to play a straight like this. He's also not going to play 2-pair like this. He doesn't have something like King 5. He's not going to bomb the river with that hand. It's just too loose. He's going to include that in his check calling range. So when he decides to shove this river, it's really important that we all get on the same page and realize that he's repping 2 things. He's repping a flush for value, or he's repping a bluff. Those are the types of hands that he can have. Now we have to ask ourselves what flushes he can have, and we'll get into that in a minute. But those are the types of hands he can have. Now, the question is this a good spot to bluff? Well, if you look at Pavel's range and you look at all the hands that he could have in this spot, you want to generally be bluffing with the worst hands that you can have. So you want to be value betting the best hands you could have, check calling with the medium strength hands that you could have, check folding some of the bad hands you could have, and then bluffing with the worst hands you can have. That's sort of how you want to approach a spot like this. And if you look at his range, you look at all the hands that Pavel could have in this spot, Queen 7 is really one of the worst hands. With the exception of something like 9x of diamonds, Queen 7 of diamonds is actually one of the worst hands he can have. He's gonna have only hands that are better than this, given how the hand was played. So he's not gonna get to the river with that many worse hands, and so he's not gonna have that many hands to choose from to bluff with that are worse than this. So for that reason, if you look at this from a theory standpoint, I actually like his decision to go ahead and bluff here, simply because this is one of the worst hands he can have, and that's generally a good way to approach bluffing. That said, when you're up against a really tough opponent like Isildur, you have to also be aware that your opponent is capable of making more hero calls than another opponent, so I would like this bluff more against a player who's more fearful, less capable of hand reading, and that's more likely to fold. The reality of the situation is, even though you're Pavel and you think, okay, this is a good spot to bluff, you really have no idea of where you're at in this hand. Isildur repped a lot of strength. He bet on the flop, bet again on the turn. Isildur could easily have a straight, a set, 2-pair, or hearts, all of which are probably going to call the river. So, it's a lot ambitious to hope that this bluff goes through, even though that it's a good spot to do it. Now let's take a look at Isildur's decision here, because some people say this is a very standard fold. He only has 1 pair. After all, he doesn't beat anything. But when you take a step back and look at what Pavel is representing, he really is saying he has a flush or nothing. And when you look at that range analysis that he can have, it becomes more apparent that there are possible bluffs in his range, and you have to really weigh what bluffs he can have. Now, Isildur has a very, very important card in his hand, which is the King of Hearts, which is called a blocker. And the reason it's a blocker is that it blocks your opponent from having one of the hands that he's representing, which is the nut flush. Because Isildur has the King of Hearts, his opponent cannot have the King of Hearts, and a king high flush is one of the most likely hands that you're threatened against, given how the hand was played. It's very reasonable that Pavel could theoretically have something like a king high flush or an ace high flush, given that he check called the flop and check called the turn. Those are really the hands that Isildur is worried about. He can't have a queen high flush, he can't have a 9 high flush, the queen and 9 are on the board, and there aren't that many other heart combos that are going to check call twice. Sure, he could have something like Jack 10 of hearts, but that's probably just going to check the river. He could also have something like Jack 8 of hearts, Jack 7 of hearts, or 10x of hearts, but that's really it, and there aren't that many combos of those hands. Otherwise, he's not going to have called the turn with his bare heart draws. Pavel's not going to call the turn with something like 7-6 of hearts. That hand is just going to fold. So Pavel either has the king high flush, which Isildur blocks, a jack high flush or a 10 high flush, which is a combo draw, which there aren't that many combos of, right? There's not that many. He's not going to have 10 deuce of hearts. It's basically going to be like 10-8, 10-7, Jack 8, Jack 7. That's really it, right? There's not that many of those combos. Maybe Jack 6, right? So, and then he could also have ace high hearts. Now, ace high hearts are a little bit questionable because it's unlikely Pavel has ace high hearts, because he's going to likely either check the river with that hand or 3-bet preflop with ace high hearts. If you're in Pavel's spot and you have something like ace-5 of hearts, well, you can't have ace-5, the 5's on the board. If you have something like ace-10 of hearts, ace-jack of hearts, ace-8 of hearts, that hand is so strong that you're probably going to want to 3-bet preflop with that hand for value. So a lot of his ace-high heart draws are discounted either because he would check the river with those to trap, or because he's going to 3-bet preflop. So when you add it all up and you're in Isildur's spot and you have a hand that blocks some of the most likely value hands that your opponent could have, and you also say to yourself, well, he could turn a hand into a bluff with something like 9x of diamonds or queen x of diamonds, which is equally likely that he has those hands as it is that he has something like jack x of hearts or 10x of hearts. Then you say, you know what, it might be something like close to 50-50 that he's bluffing here to very, very simplify the math. And given the price you're getting and the pot odds you're getting, plus the fact that you have a blocker, I can see how Isildur could want to call this river.
Only the nut flush plays this one.
Wow! What a goal! That's phenomenal!
Oh my God!
That is the greatest goal I've seen live here in Rosmerdorf. You saw it. Isildur made the call of the tournament.
Oh my word.
Isildur, credit to him, put this hand together extremely well, obviously went through a lot of the thought process and more that we're thinking about here on this river, and ended up making an epic hero call for the entire tournament. Congrats to Isildur, very well done, well deserved, and congrats on the win. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want more from me, definitely encourage you guys to join my webinar. You could click the link below and learn my best strategies for hand reading. If you like these hand of the day videos, you like the analysis I go through, I go into that and much more in a simplified, straightforward, 4-step process that you could apply to any situation versus any opponent and in any single game you play. So I'm really excited to share that with you guys on March 3rd. Click the link below and join, and I will see you guys there. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, subscribe to my channel. There's more awesome content coming your way. And from Alex Trelli here and everyone at Conscious Poker, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are awesome. See you guys next time on the Hand of the Day. Cheers.